Port Charles likes to pretend it learned how to breathe through crisis, but the air has never been thinner than it is now. In the span of one turbulent week, a quiet decision made in a kitchen with a broken vase and bruised pride becomes the first domino in a cascading campaign of calculated vengeance. Carly Spencer, who once trusted that justice could be coaxed into doing the right thing, countenances a different creed entirely. If the world will not protect her daughter, she will refashion the world until it does. The inciting offense is simple to state and impossible to forgive. Jack Brennan lured Jocelyn into the WSB machine and wagered her life for leverage. That move snapped something that motherhood had kept soft. No more petitions, no more warnings, no more waiting for men with badges or empires to suddenly discover a conscience. What follows is not an outburst. It is engineering, emotional, logistical, and ruthless, its blueprints drafted in the quiet corners where Port Charles has always decided its fate. The first piece is anonymity. Carly has learned over time that the Quartermaine Ballroom and Corinthos coffee warehouses share a physics problem: identity is gravity. Your name pulls allies to you, but it also drags enemies into your orbit. If she wants to reach the one man who can break Brennan without leaving fingerprints, she must unhook herself from her own history. Not a costume change, not a playful alias, but a full audit of who she appears to be in every database that matters. That is why she calls Damien Spinelli and speaks in the grammar of necessity. She does not ask for a passport, she asks for a life. A backstory that passes a background check, a digital shadow that behaves like it has walked through the mundane years of taxes and library cards and doctors' offices. It is an act of ethical trespass dressed as survival, and Spinelli, equal parts conscience and code, understands the stakes. When he says yes, the clock starts. A name becomes a credential becomes a ticket, and soon the woman Port Charles thinks it knows becomes the stranger Steinmauer's guards will wave through with bureaucratic indifference. Steinmauer, for its part, is less a prison than a weather system. If Pentonville is the storm you can see from your porch, Steinmauer is the pressure change you feel in your bones before the sky turns. It holds men like Valentin Cassadine because there are not many places that can. Valentin is not a friend to Carly, nor a comfort. He is a lever, cold steel, heavy, infamous for damaging the fulcrums that dare to hold him. Yet he possesses the one quality Brennan's enemies require, a personal reason to fight that is larger than revenge but more dependable than principle. Brennan humiliated him, cost him standing, compromised his chessboard. Valentin does not forgive humiliation, he metabolizes it into strategy. When the mysterious visitor with dark hair and borrowed history crosses into his field of view, what passes between them is not trust. It is alignment. Two vectors pointed at the same ruin. If Port Charles thrives on gossip, the Carly-Valentin accord starves it. There are no whispered meetings in well-lit restaurants, no traded barbs at a gala that can be misread as flirtation. Their collaboration is the unglamorous kind: spreadsheets without names, burner phones wrapped in rubber bands, maps taped inside kitchen cabinets. They reverse engineer Brennan's confidence, which is another way of saying they inventory his weaknesses with devotional attention. Where does he hoard secrets? Who launders his mistakes? Which middle managers are brittle enough to fracture under heat? Valentin sketches the architecture of Brennan's influence, the paramilitary loyalties that outlived official missions, the politicians who enjoy plausible deniability, the private contractors who reconcile morality with invoices. Carly overlays her own intelligence. The way predators underestimate a mother's patience, the blind spots men cultivate when they believe they are the only strategists in the room, the telltale rhythms of someone who has lied long enough to consider it a language. Revenge stories lose their point when they flatten into spectacle. This one sharpens as it narrows. Step 1 is insulation. Jocelyn must be pulled out of the radius of any blast. That means quietly sabotaging the WSB pipeline that connects Brennan to her assignments, corrupting the dashboard that flags her as deployable, and nudging oversight bodies to randomly audit the very unit that thought it could gamble with the life of a woman Carly raised. Whether the paperwork fails in a database in Brussels or a supervisor suddenly discovers procedural religion is immaterial. The effect is that Jocelyn's name stops appearing in dangerous places, and Brennan's options shrink without obvious interference. Step 2 is isolation. People like Brennan are ecosystems disguised as men. Remove 3 innocuous species: an accountant who balances off books costs, a logistics foreman who loves predictable schedules, a fixer who resents never getting credit, and the canopy begins to thin. Valentin knows where to find them. Carly knows how to make them want to leave. When their targets begin to sweat, the operation pivots to illumination. Port Charles harbors a library of grudges: judges who remember being embarrassed, investigators who resented being ordered to look the other way, journalists who owe favors. Carly and Valentin do not need to expose everything, they only need to expose enough. They seed documents that explain nothing on their own but make perfect sense when cross-referenced. A funding discrepancy that matches a surveillance gap. A travel manifest that places Brennan's lieutenants in the wrong hemisphere on the right night. A medical report that identifies a training accident as a gunshot wound. Each fragment is a breadcrumb too damning to ignore and too technical to sensationalize, which is precisely the tone that drags reluctant institutions into the light. The result is not a headline, it is a hearing. Brennan, of course, feels the temperature. Men like him are thermostats, they do not merely endure weather, they attempt to set it. His countermeasures are predictable and therefore dangerous: discredit the whistleblowers, sow conflict between Carly and Valentin, and remind Jocelyn that duty is a more flattering mirror than fear. Here the alliance reveals its paradox. Carly's power is her heart, the very thing Brennan marked as leverage. Valentin's power is his detachment, the very thing that once made Carly distrust him. Together they compensate for each other's vulnerabilities. When Brennan dangles bait that would enrage Carly into a mistake, Valentin absorbs the heat and quietly moves the meeting to a room with only one exit. When Brennan deploys a polished emissary to flatter Valentin back into the old Cassadine gamesmanship, Carly names the manipulation for what it is and refuses to let intellectual vanity erode moral aim. Steinmauer becomes a waypoint, not a destination. In a small visitation room where conversations are recorded and every pause is evidence, Carly's new identity functions like a cipher. She is both present and deniable, which allows the pair to test the perimeter of what Brennan can anticipate. They speak about logistics in the grammar of grief, about timelines in the language of regret, about leverage disguised as mercy. Should the recording ever surface, it will play like two adversaries mourning a lost era. The true meeting happens in the absences, in the space between glances that concede how far they are willing to go, in the little silences where conscience negotiates with necessity and does not always win. The plan's hinge arrives disguised as a concession. Brennan expects attacks from above. Grand juries, media storms, public censure. He is less prepared for the slow exodus from below. Valentin triggers it by persuading a mid-level broker, anonymous to most, indispensable to Brennan, to accept relocation under a new identity. Carly makes sure that relocation involves a public-facing job with just enough visibility to deter retrieval. A second defection follows, then a third. With each departure, Brennan must reveal a secret to close a gap, and with each secret revealed to an increasingly small circle, his empire becomes more combustible. Shrink a universe, and stars begin to collide. The moral accounting keeps pace with the tactical one. Carly did not want this life for Jocelyn, she never wanted it for herself again, either. Yet as the operation advances, she recognizes an unwelcome feeling: competence. The more effective her maneuvers become, the less available the old version of her seems. That realization does not scare her into retreat, it clarifies the cost. She can save her daughter and scorch some of the earth she once claimed as home. Both are true. Valentin also pays. Each step he takes to protect a woman he did not mean to protect brings him closer to a version of himself that remembers why he ever sought gentility. The paradox bites. To be good here, he must be excellent at the dark arts he hoped to retire. When the reckoning arrives, it refuses theatricality. Brennan is not dragged across a ballroom or cornered in a harbor warehouse, he is simply made smaller by 1,000 incremental truths made public at once. A judge who never liked him signs a warrant because the evidence leaves no room for creative interpretation. A senator's aide, previously loyal to Brennan's network, panics at the sight of her own name on a subpoena and flips. A private firm cancels a contract midterm to reassess priorities, and suddenly the equipment that used to arrive without invoices stops arriving at all. Brennan does what men of his type do next. He tries to transform his remaining power into pity. He reminds anyone who will listen that the world is unsafe without men like him guarding the night. But Cassadine Calculus and Spencer Resolve have already done their work. The city does not swoon. It exhales. To call this victory would be to misunderstand it. Carly has not reclaimed innocence, she has merely purchased time. Jocelyn will continue to walk in rooms where risk is threaded into duty, but now she does so without a puppeteer at her back. Valentin cannot pretend he has rehabilitated more than an outcome. He prevented one catastrophe and delayed other inevitable storms. Yet the measure of Port Charles has rarely been whether it can produce perfection, it is whether flawed people can extract enough good from the day to justify trying again tomorrow. On that scale, the alliance succeeds. It shows the town an unglamorous truth: sometimes the only way to disarm a monster is to be unafraid of the tools he has monopolized. In the quiet after, consequences arrive like bills. Spinelli must decide how long to safeguard the synthetic life he created for Carly, knowing that every day it exists is another temptation to use it again. Sonny will feel the gravitational tug of a war he did not authorize and will either bless it for protecting family or resent it for rewriting rules he once enforced alone. Jason will see the architecture and recognize the signature of a woman he swore to protect, and he will inventory his pride alongside his worry. Nina and Ava and Laura will draw their own moral maps and debate whether ends ever justify means in a town where the means are where people live. None of these debates will change what was necessary. They will only humanize its aftermath. And Brennan? Men like Brennan do not vanish so much as they lose altitude. Stripped of the myth that made him inevitable, he becomes a case file, then a cautionary whisper, then a problem for a bureaucrat who does not remember why he was feared. He will try to write himself into a new legend from the wreckage, exile as mystique, disgrace as martyrdom, but it is hard to mythologize a fall that happened in increments. That is the cruel genius of Carly and Valentin's design. They did not smash his empire with a single strike that history could romanticize. They unscrewed it, bolt by bolt, until there was nothing left to admire but the stubbornness with which he kept pretending the structure still stood. The town returns to its rhythms, which is to say its tremors. The Metro Court will host a fundraiser where eyes linger a beat too long on the woman in the black dress who now moves like she knows exactly which walls hold secrets. The docks will welcome a shipment that used to belong to a shadow and now pays taxes. A hospital corridor will see a Cassadine pause before an old portrait and permit himself a private half-smile that has nothing to do with triumph and everything to do with survival. Somewhere in the city, a young woman checks her phone and finds no orders, no pings, no summons, and she walks into sunlight that feels, if only for an afternoon, like an answer. What remains, then, is a town that understands itself a little better. Carly did not become a different species by choosing offense, she simply accepted that defense was no longer an option. Valentin did not transcend his lineage, he curated it. Together they wrote a short chapter with long echoes, proof that unlikely allies can reroute a powerful man's story without becoming his mirror. Port Charles will need that lesson again, probably sooner than anyone wants to admit. But for now, the city enjoys a rare luxury, a night without new alarms, a morning where headlines are about policy instead of blood, a moment when the past does not dictate the hour. The work of keeping it that way will begin again by noon. For a handful of heartbeats, however, the quiet feels earned.